As for the Pope, I refuse him, as Christ's enemy and Antichrist, with all his false doctrine. Thomas Cranmer. When Edward VI ascended the throne, he was still just a child. The only son of Henry VIII, he was born to the king and his third wife, Jane Seymour, in 1537. As a child, he had positive relationships with his stepmothers Anne of Cleves and Catherine Parr, who served as surrogate mother figures for the young prince. When his father died in 1547, the leaders of England decided to form a regency council that would govern until King Edward reached his majority. Chief among his advisors were his uncle, Edward Seymour, and the Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer. During Edward's reign, Anglican theology and practice began to shift further from Roman Catholic traditions, taking on a unique Protestant nature. Cranmer took the lead on these developments, beginning with the Book of Common Prayer in 1549, with an updated edition released 3 years later. This new Anglican liturgy replaced Latin with English services. The liturgical calendar was revised, and the order of service shifted. Protestant theology, which had rubbed off on Cranmer through his contacts in Europe, was introduced into the liturgy, most notably an emphasis on justification by faith rather than by works. The king himself took an interest in religious matters, and England seemed poised to continue its transformation into a Protestant state. But in 1553, the young king grew sick. Within 6 months, he was dead. During his illness, Edward understood the serious crisis that would emerge upon his death and had to consider who might succeed him to the throne. He had no brothers, and since he was still a teenager, he had not fathered any children. His choice to succeed him was his cousin, Lady Jane Grey, the teenage granddaughter of Henry VIII's younger sister and a Protestant. Prior to June 1553, his heir presumptive had been his elder sister Mary, the daughter of Henry VIII, and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Yet Mary had remained a devoted Roman Catholic, and even though she was considered illegitimate, she was still the official recognized heir. But Edward, possibly out of a desire to keep England Protestant, instead named Lady Jane Grey as his heir. He died the next month. His sister Mary was quick to make a move. Though Lady Jane Grey had been named the king's heir, there were many in England willing to see a return to Roman Catholicism. Lady Jane Grey only reigned for 9 days before she lost the throne to Mary and her supporters. She was soon imprisoned in the Tower of London, where she would eventually be executed, and holds the distinction as England's shortest reigning monarch. Mary moved to undo the Reformation of her father and brother, seeking to return England to the Roman Catholic faith. During her reign, many Protestants were exiled and some were executed, most notably Thomas Cranmer, now an old man still serving as the Archbishop of Canterbury. During Mary's reign, Cranmer was imprisoned and forced to answer the charges of treason and heresy. After enduring months of captivity and the promise of death by burning at the stake, Cranmer finally recanted his positions against the authority of the Pope and Catholic doctrine, and he was welcomed back into the Catholic faith. It would not be enough to save him, and in 1556 he was condemned to die by burning at the stake. Cranmer was led to the stake, where in his final speech he first echoed his earlier written and spoken sentiments, urging obedience to the Queen. But at the last moment, he returned to his long-held theological positions, calling the Pope Antichrist and reverting to his Protestant beliefs. As the flames took him, he thrust his hand into the fire, burning the appendage that had signed his earlier recantations. Cranmer was not alone in those persecuted, and Mary would later earn the title Bloody Mary in remembrance of her vengeful persecutions. Among the persecuted were a group which fled to the Low Countries, who would receive a dose of Dutch Calvinist austerity during their exile. After the reign of Mary, they would return to England as a new radical denomination of the English Church, the Puritans. Mary sought not only religious reconciliation with continental Europe, but also political alliance. In 1554, the year after she secured the throne, Mary wedded Philip II of Spain, her cousin and the son of the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. The two would rule England jointly, seeking to restore Roman Catholicism to the country. This counter-reformation was cut short when Mary died in 1558, and Philip lost all claim to rule England. Because she'd had no children, the crown then passed to Mary's sister Elizabeth, and Philip returned to Spain to brood on his next moves. Over the coming decades, the fate of the English church would hang in the balance.